Happy Friday and welcome to Friday Tech Bites. I'm Corinne Bassett and I'm joined here by Kirsten Stoner. And we're excited to give you some updates we have on the Microsoft 365 side and some changes to those Microsoft Teams APIs that you need to be aware of and may have to do some actual interactions. And we're going to walk you through exactly what you need to do and fill out to make sure you have no interruptions in service. But before we get into that, we want to talk about where you are. We're here in Ohio, and we want you to post in chat wherever you're looking at, wherever you're looking from, and tell us where you're at. Some of our background crew is down here in Texas and Georgia. And Kirsten, if you want to go ahead and take it away and get us started here.
Cool. Thanks, Corinne. Like Corinne mentioned, we are going to be talking about the Teams Export API. So what is this Export API? And this is a protected API that Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 will now be required to utilize to take a successful backup of your Teams data. Now, previously, the backup of Teams was achieved by reading a hidden folder within Exchange Online called Teams Messages Data. This is no longer going to be the case, and we will be required to use this Exports API to protect that Teams data. This API will allow us to extract information from one-on-one messages, group chats, meeting chats, channel messages right from the Microsoft Teams Cosmos database message store. So the previous way that we used to take the backup is changing. So we're going to be using this new Teams Export API. It is protected, and we'll talk a little bit more about that just because you're going to have to request access to that API. And not only is it protected, it's also a metered API. So this means that it's going to come to a cost to customers to be able to access it. So really, changing the game up of how we take the API and how we access that data. Corinne, is there anything else that you would like to add to this?
Not a whole lot. That's exactly what this API is doing, is instead of using the Microsoft Graph APIs for Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint, we're getting a Teams API. So beyond just being able to access the data, knowing where the data is on the back end with the proper metadata, we're going to be able to start restoring and getting more restoration features. And since this is going to be a metered API, meaning that depending on your license at a certain cost, you may have to pay per transaction, and it's 0.000 cents. And we'll take a look at a chart here in a minute. But you're also paying for service, which we're hoping is going to kind of lead to us having less throttling in this environment because you're paying for your own access. And then they're going to put some more development into it, meaning all of those requests that we get, hey, can you back up this portion of Teams? Well, now we can. And I think our next page here is with that model and that licensing. So with the model and the licensing, it's going to depend which license you have. You may have so many costs for that export API for Microsoft Teams coming out. We can see the E5 eligible license, but if you're running some of those less license or education license in some cases, you're going to be charged per transactions for messages. This doesn't always include, say, the different channel tabs and files and links to those files, but these are specifically the messages that end users are transacting within chats. And do you have anything to add to that, Kirsten?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I do think, like what you mentioned earlier, is the API is going to give us a little bit more access to back up that important data that you want. This is a different type of API. It is metered. You're going to have to pay for it. Preferably, Model A looks like what we would want to be doing because we get a little bit more of a cost affordable option. But we also, need to, kind of talk to Microsoft about this and let them, utilize these options for us to our customers because that's going to help you in the long run because you're going to be charged for it and it's going to go directly to your Azure bill, is your Azure Active Directory bill, I believe, right? So You gotta get on Microsoft, I guess. I don't know. But
So we're all for the metered APIs. The metered APIs mean there's going to be better development. There's going to be less throttling for organizations because it's all going to be cost per what you use. The question kind of comes around because this isn't the first service provider to offer a metered API. Salesforce has been doing it for years. Now, this metered API is going to allow different end users access to their data when they need access, but we need to talk about cost. If this is something that tends to start to be a higher cost to do proper protection of your backup infrastructure, then we're going to have our customers go to Microsoft, because one service provider and vendor going, hey, this is costing people money, isn't going to break open that door. We've already reached out to some of our Vanguard communities and a lot of our other advocacy programs. On this next slide, we're going to start to dive into what we're doing or what you need to do in order to get access to this API, because it's not default in organizations. Even though they are making everyone switch over it, all vendors are going to be affected. So even if you're not a Veeam person today, but you do Microsoft 365 backup or anything with export of data from Microsoft Teams, by October 1st, you're going to have to fill out this Microsoft request graph. This is going to then allow your organization access to this API. They don't want customers getting charged out of nowhere. They want you to be aware of what you're interacting with, which is why they filled out and made this request form.
Yes, Corinne, can you show us a little bit more, like what this request form is going to look like?
So we're going to go through, I know it says demo, and my heart broke a little when I'm like, I think I'm going to use screenshots because this is some personal information from our organization, and it's not that I don't trust you, it's that my security side inside couldn't do a live demo. So you're going to need some information to start with. And if you're not familiar with the Azure environment or the Azure AD environment, it's right inside of your administrative centers. If you need to go from start to finish, you can either directly type in the address or go over to office.com, get into your admin center. And on the left-hand side, you'll have, among your other admin centers, the Azure AD Admin Center. Inside of here, you're going to go to all services and look for your enterprise applications. There's going to be a list of applications that are being interacted with your organization. If you're new to Veeam and you haven't set up your modern authentication yet with your application API for authentication, you do have to switch over to the modern authentication. Microsoft is deprecating that username and password basic authentication method to get in. Once you're in the enterprise application, it's the very first click, it's in the overview screen, and you're going to want to copy down this application ID because we're going to use this on the form to request the data from Microsoft. So on the next screen we can take a look at starting to fill this out. There are several options. I believe once we get through it, there's about 13 different options that we have to fill out. The first one's pretty easy. You have to put in an email address. Now, this email address needs to be a part of your organization, and then you can add additional email addresses if you need to have additional people looped in onto this. And it even shows you put a semicolon to separate those out. Next is going to be the publisher name. The publisher name is just the Veeam software. And we're still on the forms here.
Sorry, Corinne. I'm sorry.
We got 6 things on the screen to take a look at. The next thing is going to be that application name. So the application that you made to do the authentication with Veeam has a name, and we'll add that name in here, the organization application ID. Then it gets a little easier. There's one other piece of information we're going to have to gather from Azure here on the next screen, but you'll select backup, and you got to create a reason. Now, the reason we put in here, allow access to Teams data messages. You can put for backup. Our links that we're going to send you later is going to have a copy and paste kind of generic line that you can put in there to help activate this. So we'll move to the next screen now. And we're going to need to get your tenant ID. Tenant ID is in that same Azure Active Directory place, except in all services, you're just going to Azure Active Directory. It's again on that overview screen, and you need your tenant ID. And we'll use this tenant ID, and on the next screen, we'll start to fill out the information in the latter half of the form. Now, this form will be shorter when you start it, but as soon as you start selecting more options, it'll create variable options for you to additionally fill out. So the one, I feel like someone like me wrote this form because the option you want is, it's obvious to only admin installing this app and going on. Then you're going to want to put in number 8 is going to show up to put in that ID. Now, if you have other tenants or you don't own every tenant in your organization, you will have extra steps to fill out. In this case, we didn't, and we hit yes. But even when you go to the next screen here, it's still going to give you the prompts like, hey, if you don't own everything and you're sure you don't own everything, this is the information you're going to need. But if you notice, none of these are started to have to fill out, so we'll go ahead and hit the next screen. And we're almost done. You just have to consent at this point. And we hit yes and submit. I did this last night because I knew I had to do it anyways for my organization eventually. So now I have to wait about 2 weeks. And no one gets an exception. I believe, Kirsten, you looked it up, and they only do it about once a week, and people are complaining about it taking time. And if your organization is one of the affected, that gets switched over early, because October 1st is the date that it's supposed to cut over. But some organizations we're running into through our support team have already been cut off and have been starting to go through this process ad hoc. So don't wait until October. You may get cut off before that.
Yeah, they say the early bird catches the worm. So you should fill it out now so you don't have to worry about later. But what's really important is, how will Veeam use this, Corinne?
So when will Veeam use this?
Oh, gosh, it's Friday. I don't know. Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
So Veeam will start using this in version 6A, and we're working on the development because originally it was planned by Microsoft to only let any backup provider be able to use Model B, which is going to automatically make everyone be charged in their organization for the very first message exported from a user. Now we've been accessed and changed over to being able to use Model A. We're working on a back-end development to make sure that customers that do have the E5 license, the escalated security license, the license that permit you to use Model A, which gives you kind of like that buffer before they start charging you, since you pay more for their license and their access to their APIs, into our release for version 6A. And we'll have that out definitely before October for you guys. But you want to make sure you're getting the request. You can put in the request even before you update, which is why I did it here.
So if a customer was to, upgrade to version 6A, and they didn't request access to this API, will their backups of their team's data fail, or how will that work within Veeam?
Yes, so if you go the other way and you update the product without requesting the API, you will lose access and the inability to do backup of Microsoft Teams. Now, if you do not use Teams backup in your organization, you just do, let's say, OneDrive, Exchange, and SharePoint, you'll be okay. You'll have to uncheck the box inside of your organization for backing up Teams and messages, but you'll have the option to then submit your API request and start backing up and protecting the Teams channels for your organization.
Okay, so you definitely want to get on requesting access to this API. So some takeaways is, every Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 users should know about this change, just because you aren't going to be able to have a successful Teams backup So if you need to back up that team's data, make sure you spread the word, make sure you tell all your friends who work in IT, make sure you spread the word. Also, be aware of Microsoft just around the pricing. How much is it going to cost you to be able to utilize this API to protect that data? It might be a good idea to perform, an audit, see which chats you need to for sure be backing up. Start thinking about how you can start estimating these costs for your organization so you can be prepared. And also, talk to us about help us in talking to Microsoft about allowing backup vendors to use this API, Model A, for customers, especially with the right SKU. And there are some additional resources that already have been released by Veeam online. We have that really great knowledge base article here. We also have a good blog post that you can read more just to learn about this. And then we also, in the Veeam Community Hub, have some posts in there as well if you need a little bit more knowledge about that. Is there anything else that you would like to add here, Corinne?
So each of these resources give you some background and links to some GitHub posts on how you can estimate costs for your organization based off of your SKU and how many messages that you're communicating or users are sending out. We also have tips and tricks on where to find that data that we already covered in this video, but those copy and pasted lines of words saying, hey, I need Teams messages, this is for backup, those are within the KB article here and within the blog post that you see below. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in our chat here. We can try to answer everything we can. We're still in the development process for how this is going to be fully utilized because this is a new API from Microsoft. It's not something that's been around forever and we're able to just like pull information out. If you do have concerns about the pricing and say maybe it's too much, I would definitely start talking to Microsoft before it gets released. We have until October 1st for them to really finalize some of those charges coming to your organization.
Yeah, that's right. And I know we've talked a lot about this API, but we have been missing something, and that's, going to the map and seeing where you guys are all from. So we have some people in Minnesota, California, Canada, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands. My friend actually was just in the Netherlands. I'm super jealous. She looks like she's having an amazing vacation. Poland, Portugal, back down to South America and Brazil, Kenya, UAE, Thailand, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and India. I think we got all of them. So thank you so much, you guys, for joining us all around the globe. I appreciate it. I've only been to a handful of those countries. I wish I could go to all of them, honestly.
Well, a quick check with our backend team. Do we have any questions coming in about the metered API, how it's going to be implemented, when it's going to happen, where to find any resources? So I'm not seeing anything here. And it looks like there's no questions.
I have a question. Maybe you can help with the answer. So if a user needs to request access to this and they need to back up their Teams data, do you have any tips for them on how they can estimate costs that it might cost for them to use this API?
Yeah, some of our posts out there and those resources that we gave have GitHub links that go into your organization and estimate how many messages or tell you how many messages your users are currently utilizing on different channels and in different parts of your organization. Once you have an idea of what is going on, then you can start to apply, okay, I have an E3, E5 license. It's not going to cost me anything because my users have less than 1,000 a month. Or it's going to cost me so much money because I don't have those higher license points. And this is going to be either cost prohibitive or you guys are able to put that into a budget. But it's definitely a concern. It's going to be automatically on your bill.
And so this API, I know that it lets us, extract that information with messages, team chats. Is this required for all of Teams data, or is it just a certain amount or a certain section of Teams data? Because you have channels, you have groups, different things. Is it for all the Teams data?
Well, we don't currently back up any private chats. So this will only apply to Teams messages at this point. There are tabs and things like that inside of your different channels, but those tabs being able to pull that metadata in should not count against your API export count. These are specifically Teams messages.
Okay, cool. So just to, I guess, close out here, this was a great conversation. With, Microsoft Teams, it's always changing. I think you told me this when we were talking on the phone, Corinne. You said, hey, it's always changing. We have to be aware of that. But we do have some shows coming up. I don't know. Do you want me to tease them, Corinne, or do you want to go for it?
I got them pulled up here. We can go
Okay, you got
ahead
it.
and close that out. Yeah, closing thoughts is be aware, don't wait until the last minute, but be excited about coming into Monday. Monday, we're back at our regular time, noon, and wrapping up the ransomware trends report. Now, this ransomware trends report, I use it in so many of my presentations. The data is independent. It is about all different types of organizations. It's from the administrator to the C-level executive types of views. And I use it as a great way to give to customers so that they can get the proper budget and be protected. Then Friday, we have an exciting intro to, hey, let's celebrate Sysadmin Day. I don't think I've ever celebrated Sysadmin Day. I didn't know it was a thing until I read it on this report, but I'm actually kind of excited.
I love a good Sysadmin Day. I celebrate every year.
Well, we super appreciate you sticking it out with us, making some noise in the community, letting everyone know about some of these changes that are coming to Teams, and hope you have a fantastic Friday.